Montreal stands as a testament to the power of cultural fusion, where European ambition met North American wilderness to create something entirely unique. Tonight, we'll uncover how a small fur trading post on an island in the St. Lawrence River evolved into one of the continent's most distinctive cities, a place where French culture took root and flourished thousands of miles from Paris. We'll discover how Montreal survived centuries of conflict, economic upheaval, and political transformation to become the beating heart of French North America. From its humble beginnings as a missionary settlement to its rise as a commercial powerhouse, this city has witnessed the collision of empires, the birth of a nation, and the relentless march of progress. So just relax and let your mind drift as we explore the remarkable story of Montreal, where cobblestone streets echo with centuries of history and modern skyscrapers cast shadows over buildings that predate the American Revolution. When you think of Montreal today, perhaps you picture the bustling streets of Old Montreal with their European charm, or the towering spires of Notre Dame Basilica piercing the skyline. You might imagine the vibrant festivals that fill the summer air with music and laughter, or the underground city that shelters residents from the harsh winter winds. But long before any of these iconic features existed, this island in the St. Lawrence River was home to a very different kind of settlement. The area we now call Montreal was inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years before the first European explorer ever set foot on North American soil. The Iroquoian village of Hochelaga flourished here when Jacques Cartier first encountered it in 1535. This thriving community of perhaps 1,500 people had established itself on the slopes of what Cartier would name Mount Royal, the mountain that would later give Montreal its name. The village was surrounded by wooden palisades and filled with longhouses where families lived together in extended kinship groups. Cartier described Hochelaga as a place of remarkable organisation and prosperity. The inhabitants cultivated corn, beans and squash in the fertile soil around their settlement, while the river provided an abundance of fish and served as a highway for trade with distant communities. When Cartier climbed the mountain and gazed out over the surrounding landscape, he could see for miles in every direction, understanding immediately the strategic importance of this location. Yet when Samuel de Champlain arrived in the area decades later, Hochelaga had mysteriously vanished. The reasons for the village's disappearance remain one of the great mysteries of early Canadian history. Disease brought by European contact, warfare with neighbouring tribes, or simply the natural movement of peoples may have been responsible for this dramatic change. What Champlain found instead was an island that seemed almost empty, waiting for a new chapter in its long history. The French explorer recognised the same strategic advantages that had drawn the Iroquoians to this spot. The island sat at the confluence of major waterways, where the Ottawa River joined the St. Lawrence, creating a natural crossroads for anyone seeking to penetrate the interior of the continent. But it would be another generation before the French would establish a permanent settlement here. The early decades of the 17th century saw France focused on developing Quebec City as the capital of New France, while Montreal's island remained largely uninhabited by Europeans. The vision for what would become Montreal emerged from an unlikely source, a group of devoutly religious French Catholics who saw an opportunity to create a model Christian community in the New World. Led by Jérôme Le Royer de la Dauversière and backed by the mysterious Company of the Holy Sacrament, this group conceived of a settlement that would serve both God and France. Their chosen representative was Paul Chomde, Sieur de Maisonneuve, a soldier and nobleman who possessed the rare combination of military skill and religious devotion necessary for such an ambitious undertaking. In 1641, Maisonneuve arrived in Quebec with a carefully selected group of colonists, including Jeanne Mance, a remarkable woman who would serve as the settlement's nurse and administrator. The governor of New France, Charles de Montmagny, tried to dissuade Maisonneuve from his mission. The island was too exposed, too dangerous, he argued. The Iroquois controlled much of the surrounding territory and had shown themselves to be formidable enemies of the French. Surely it would be wiser to reinforce Quebec or establish a settlement in a less vulnerable location. But Maisonneuve was not to be deterred. He famously declared that even if all the trees on the island were Iroquois warriors, his duty remained clear. God had called him to establish a settlement on Montreal Island, and establish one he would. On May 17th, 1642, Maisonneuve and his 40-odd colonists landed on the shores of Montreal Island and founded Ville-Marie de Montreal. The name reflected their dual purpose, honouring the Virgin Mary while claiming this strategic location for France. They erected a wooden fort near the present-day Old Port, raised a cross on the mountain, and began the challenging work of carving a European settlement out of the North American wilderness. The early years of Ville-Marie were nothing short of harrowing. The settlement existed in a state of constant siege, with Iroquois war parties regularly attacking anyone who ventured outside the protective walls of the fort. Colonists were killed while working in their fields, ambushed while travelling to and from Quebec, and sometimes captured and carried away to face uncertain fates. The most famous of these early conflicts involved Adam Dollard des Ormeaux and his 16 companions, who in 1660 decided to intercept an Iroquois raiding party before it could reach Montreal. Their last stand at the Long Sault Rapids became legendary in French-Canadian folklore, though historians still debate whether Dollard was a heroic defender of the colony or simply an ill-prepared adventurer seeking glory and plunder. What cannot be disputed is that Montreal's survival during these early decades required extraordinary courage and determination. The colonists lived with the constant knowledge that death could come at any moment, yet they persevered in their mission to establish a permanent French presence in the heart of North America. Jeanne Mance proved herself indispensable during these difficult years. She not only tended to the wounded and sick, but also made several dangerous journeys back to France to secure additional funding and colonists for the struggling settlement. Her Hôtel Dieu Hospital, established in 1645, became one of the first permanent medical institutions in North America and a symbol of the colonists' determination to build a civilized society in the wilderness. The religious character of early Montreal was unmistakable. The colonists began each day with prayers and ended it with evening devotions. The Sulpician priests who arrived in 1657 to take charge of the settlement's spiritual life brought with them a vision of creating a perfect Christian community that would serve as an example to the world. Yet beneath this religious veneer, Montreal was already showing signs of its future commercial importance. The settlement's location made it a natural gathering point for coureurs de bois, the French woodsmen who ventured deep into the continental interior in search of furs. These hardy adventurers would disappear into the wilderness for months at a time, returning with canoes loaded with beaver pelts and tales of distant lands and peoples. The fur trade was transforming Montreal from a struggling missionary outpost into something far more significant. Indigenous peoples from across the Great Lakes region began making annual journeys to Montreal to trade their furs for European manufactured goods. These trading fairs became major events, with hundreds of canoes arriving each summer loaded with the wealth of the forest. By the 1670s, Montreal had clearly evolved beyond its founders' original vision. While the Sulpicians continued to play an important role in the community's life, the settlement was increasingly driven by commercial rather than purely religious motivations. Young men from the colony were venturing ever further into the interior, establishing trading relationships with indigenous peoples and mapping routes that would eventually lead French explorers to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. The transformation of Montreal from Ville-Marie to a true commercial centre was symbolised by the construction of new stone buildings to replace the original wooden structures. The Notre-Dame de Bon Secours Chapel, begun in 1675, represented both the community's continued religious devotion and its growing prosperity. Meanwhile, wealthy merchants began building impressive stone houses that rivaled anything found in Quebec City. This period also saw the arrival of new waves of immigrants who would help shape Montreal's distinctive character. The filles du roi, young women sent from France to provide wives for the colony's bachelors, brought with them the customs and traditions of their home regions. Soldiers who had served their terms in the colonial military often chose to remain in Montreal, adding their skills and perspectives to the growing community. The Indigenous peoples who had been pushed aside during Montreal's early years were not merely passive observers of these changes. Groups like the Mohawk had developed complex relationships with the French colonists, sometimes trading partners, sometimes enemies, always a crucial factor in the settlement's survival and growth. The Great Peace of Montreal in 1701 would eventually establish a framework for coexistence, but that diplomatic triumph still lay decades in the future. As the 17th century drew to a close, Montreal had established itself as something unique in North America. It was neither purely French nor purely North American, but rather a hybrid creation that drew strength from both worlds. The settlement had survived its precarious early decades and was poised for the explosive growth that would make it one of the continent's great cities. The foundations had been laid for Montreal's future greatness. Its strategic location, its role as a gateway to the continental interior, and its growing population of hardy, adaptable residents all pointed toward a future filled with both promise and challenge. What no one could have predicted was just how dramatically the world was about to change, and how those changes would test Montreal's resilience in ways its founders never imagined. The dawn of the 18th century brought with it winds of change that would reshape not only Montreal, but the entire balance of power in North America. As the settlement entered its second century of existence, it found itself at the center of imperial ambitions that stretched from the courts of European capitals to the vast wilderness of the North American interior. Montreal's population had grown to nearly 3,000 inhabitants by 1700, making it a substantial community by colonial standards. The streets that had once echoed only with the footsteps of a few dozen desperate colonists now bustled with merchants, craftsmen, soldiers, and administrators. Stone houses lined the waterfront, their steep pitched roofs and thick walls testament to both French architectural traditions and the harsh realities of the Canadian climate. The fur trade had become the lifeblood of the settlement, transforming Montreal into the undisputed capital of New France's most lucrative industry. Every spring brought a renewal of commercial activity as Indigenous traders arrived with their winter's harvest of pelts. The annual fur fairs had grown into massive gatherings that could see over 1,000 canoes converging on the settlement simultaneously. These trading expeditions were extraordinary spectacles that captured the essence of Montreal's unique position between two worlds. Native American traders would paddle their birch-bark canoes hundreds of miles through treacherous waters and hostile territory to reach the settlement. They brought with them not just furs, but news from distant regions, stories of new peoples encountered, and intelligence about the movements of rival European powers. The French merchants who participated in this trade had developed their own distinctive culture. Many had intermarried with Indigenous women, creating families that bridged two worlds and spoke multiple languages. These relationships were not merely matters of convenience, but often represented genuine partnerships that combined European commercial knowledge with Indigenous understanding of the vast continental interior. Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville exemplified this new breed of Montreal-based adventurer. Born in the settlement in 1661, he would go on to establish French colonies in Louisiana and fight English forces from Hudson Bay to the Caribbean. His exploits demonstrated how Montreal was producing men who thought on a continental scale, viewing North America as a theatre for French expansion rather than simply a source of furs. The wealth generated by the fur trade was transforming Montreal's physical appearance as well. The Château Ramezay, constructed in 1705 as the residence of the colonial governor, showcased the prosperity that trade had brought to the settlement. Its elegant stone facade and formal gardens announced to visitors that this was no longer a struggling frontier outpost, but a mature colonial city with its own aristocracy and cultural pretensions. Religious life continued to play a central role in Montreal's identity, though it had evolved considerably from the austere missionary settlement envisioned by the original founders. The Sulpicians had become not just spiritual leaders, but major landowners and political powers in their own right. They controlled vast tracts of land on the island and had established a seminary that served as one of the few centres of higher learning in New France. The Hôtel Dieu Hospital, founded by Jean Mance, had grown into a substantial institution staffed by the Hospitallers of St. Joseph. These dedicated women provided medical care not just to Montreal's residents, but to travellers, soldiers, and Indigenous peoples from across the region. Their work represented one of the most successful aspects of the original religious mission, demonstrating that Christian charity could indeed flourish in the North American wilderness. Yet even as Montreal prospered, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. The English colonies to the south were growing rapidly in population and economic strength. What had once seemed like a distant threat was becoming an immediate concern as English traders began pushing into territories that the French considered their exclusive domain. The Hudson's Bay Company, established by English Royal Charter in 1670, represented a direct challenge to Montreal's fur trading monopoly. Operating from posts around Hudson Bay, the English could offer Indigenous traders a shorter route to European markets and often better prices for their furs. This competition threatened to undermine the very foundation of Montreal's prosperity. Military tensions were escalating as well. King William's War, which raged from 1689 to 1697, had brought warfare directly to Montreal's doorstep. The settlement found itself targeted by English and Iroquois raiding parties that sought to destroy French power in North America once and for all. The massacre at Lachine in 1689, where Iroquois warriors killed dozens of colonists just outside Montreal, served as a brutal reminder of how precarious the settlement's position remained. These conflicts revealed both Montreal's vulnerabilities and its strengths. The settlement's location, while strategically valuable, also made it exposed to attack from multiple directions. Enemy forces could approach via the St. Lawrence River, overland from the south, or through the network of rivers and lakes that connected Montreal to the continental interior. But Montreal's residents had developed into formidable fighters in their own right. Decades of frontier warfare had created a population that knew how to handle weapons, move quietly through forests, and adapt European military tactics to North American conditions. The coureurs de bois who ventured into the wilderness for furs also served as scouts and guerrilla fighters when military necessity demanded. The Great Peace of Montreal in 1701 represented a diplomatic triumph that secured the settlement's position for the next half-century. This remarkable treaty brought together representatives of over 30 Indigenous nations in the largest diplomatic gathering in North American history up to that time. The negotiations, conducted primarily in Montreal, established the settlement as a recognized center of Indigenous diplomacy and French colonial administration. The treaty's significance extended far beyond its immediate military benefits. By securing peace with the Iroquois Confederacy, Montreal gained access to new trading routes and territories that had been closed for decades. The settlement could now serve as a base for French expansion into the Ohio River Valley and the Great Lakes region, without constantly looking over its shoulder for Iroquois war parties. This period of relative peace allowed Montreal to consolidate its position as the commercial heart of New France. The settlement's merchants established trading relationships that stretched from the Atlantic coast to the Rocky Mountains. French explorers and traders operating out of Montreal would eventually reach the Pacific Ocean and establish settlements in Louisiana, creating a continental empire that dwarfed anything the English colonies could claim. The prosperity of early 18th century Montreal was reflected in its growing sophistication as a cultural centre. The settlement now boasted not just churches and hospitals, but schools, libraries, and even theatrical performances. Wealthy merchants imported luxury goods from France and built elaborate homes that rivaled those of Quebec City's aristocracy. Social life in Montreal was developing its own distinctive characteristics that blended French refinement with North American practicality. Elaborate dinner parties and formal balls coexisted with the rough camaraderie of the fur trade. Women like Marianne Barbel, who successfully managed extensive business operations after her husband's death, demonstrated that Montreal society offered opportunities for female independence that were rare in the European world. The settlement's population was becoming increasingly diverse as well. In addition to French colonists and Indigenous peoples, Montreal was home to Scottish and Irish immigrants, German craftsmen, and even a few English merchants who had chosen to throw in their lot with New France. This cosmopolitan character would become one of Montreal's defining features, setting it apart from more homogeneous colonial settlements. Educational institutions were beginning to flourish as Montreal's wealth allowed investment in intellectual pursuits. The Sulpician Seminary offered classical education to young men destined for careers in the church or colonial administration. Meanwhile, the Congregation de Notre Dame, founded by Marguerite Bourgeois, provided education for girls that was remarkably progressive by 18th century standards. The arts were finding their place in Montreal as well. Local craftsmen were producing furniture, silverwork, and religious artifacts that combined French techniques with North American materials and motifs. The distinctive Montreal style that emerged from this fusion would influence decorative arts throughout New France and leave a lasting mark on Quebec's cultural identity. As Montreal entered the second quarter of the 18th century, it had clearly established itself as one of North America's most important cities. Its influence extended across a continent, its merchants were among the wealthiest in the New World, and its cultural institutions rivaled those of much larger European cities. The struggling missionary settlement of Ville-Marie had evolved into a genuine metropolis that served as the beating heart of French civilization in North America, yet success brought with it new challenges and responsibilities. Montreal's very prosperity made it a target for enemies, who recognized that controlling this strategic settlement could determine the fate of all North America. The coming decades would test everything that Montreal's residents had built, forcing them to defend not just their city, but their entire way of life against forces that threatened to sweep away French power forever. The stage was set for the greatest drama in Montreal's history, a series of conflicts that would determine whether this remarkable city would continue to flourish as the centre of a French North American empire, or find itself absorbed into the rapidly expanding world of British colonial power. The middle decades of the 18th century would prove to be Montreal's golden age, a time when the settlement reached heights of prosperity and influence that seemed to promise unlimited expansion across the North American continent. The city that had begun as a precarious missionary outpost now commanded trade routes that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific, while its merchants accumulated fortunes that rivaled those of their counterparts in Paris or London. Montreal's transformation into a true metropolis was evident in every aspect of daily life. The narrow streets that had once been little more than muddy paths were now paved with cobblestones imported from France. Elegant carriages rolled past stone mansions, whose wrought iron balconies and steep copper roofs proclaimed their owners' wealth and sophistication. The waterfront, once dominated by a simple wooden fort, now boasted substantial warehouses, counting houses, and the elaborate residences of the city's merchant princes. The fur trade remained the foundation of this prosperity, but it had evolved into something far more complex than the simple exchange of pelts for manufactured goods that had characterized Montreal's early years. The city's merchants now operated as financiers and organizers of vast commercial networks that employed thousands of voyageurs, coureurs de bois, and indigenous traders across half a continent. These trading expeditions had become marvels of organization and endurance that captured the imagination of visitors from Europe. Each spring, brigades of canoes would depart from Montreal's harbour, loaded with trade goods and supplies for the journey west. The voyageurs who manned these vessels represented a unique breed of men who combined French joie de vivre with North American toughness, singing traditional songs as they paddled through rapids that could claim lives without warning. The annual departure of the canoe brigades had become one of Montreal's most spectacular events, drawing crowds of spectators to the waterfront. Hundreds of birch bark canoes would be loaded with everything from steel axes and wool blankets to glass beads and brandy, while their crews made final preparations for journeys that could last months and cover thousands of miles. Pierre Gauthier de Varennes, Sieur de la Vérendrye, exemplified the spirit of exploration that emanated from Montreal during this golden age. Operating from the city as his base, La Vérendrye and his sons pushed the boundaries of French exploration further west than any Europeans had ventured before, establishing trading posts and claiming vast territories for the French crown. Their expeditions, financed by Montreal merchants and manned by voyageurs recruited from the city's streets, discovered Lake Winnipeg, explored the Saskatchewan River, and may have been the first Europeans to glimpse the Rocky Mountains. These achievements demonstrated Montreal's role not just as a commercial centre, but as a launching pad for continental exploration and expansion. The wealth flowing into Montreal from these far-flung trading operations was reshaping the city's social structure. A new aristocracy of fur trade barons emerged, families whose fortunes allowed them to live in a style that rivaled European nobility. The Babeuf family, the Lemoyne, and other merchant dynasties built palatial homes and established themselves as the undisputed leaders of Montreal society. These merchant families often intermarried with the colonial nobility, creating a unique social elite that combined commercial acumen with aristocratic pretensions. Their elaborate entertainments became legendary throughout New France, featuring imported wines, orchestral music, and formal dances that transported participants thousands of miles from the North American wilderness. Yet Montreal's prosperity was not confined to a small elite. The fur trade generated employment for thousands of ordinary citizens who worked as craftsmen, shopkeepers, voyageurs, and labourers. The city's shipbuilders constructed the canoes and bateaux that carried trade goods into the interior, while its gunsmiths, tailors, and provisioners supplied everything needed for the dangerous journeys west. The religious institutions that had played such a crucial role in Montreal's founding continued to evolve and expand during this period of prosperity. The Sulpicians used their growing wealth to construct magnificent churches and establish educational institutions that served the entire colony. The Seminary of Saint-Sulpice became one of the most impressive buildings in New France, its classical architecture proclaiming Montreal's status as a centre of learning and culture. Women's religious orders also flourished during Montreal's Golden Age. The Grey Nuns, founded by Marguerite d'Youville in 1737, established themselves as pioneers in social work and education. Their hospital and charitable institutions provided services not just to Montreal's residents, but to travellers and Indigenous peoples from across the region. The cultural life of 18th century Montreal reflected the city's unique position between European sophistication and North American innovation. Local artisans developed distinctive styles that combined French techniques with Indigenous motifs and New World materials. Montreal furniture makers created pieces that were prized throughout the colony for their elegance and craftsmanship, while the city's silversmiths produced religious and domestic objects that rivaled anything created in Paris. Literary culture was beginning to emerge as well. Montreal's educated elite maintained correspondence with intellectuals in France and other parts of North America, participating in the broader Enlightenment discourse that was transforming European thought. Private libraries in the city's grand homes contained the latest works of philosophy, science and literature, creating an intellectual atmosphere that belied Montreal's frontier origins. The city's population had grown to nearly 5,000 by mid-century, making it one of the largest urban centres in North America. This growth brought with it new challenges and opportunities as Montreal evolved from a compact settlement where everyone knew their neighbours into a genuine city with distinct neighbourhoods and social classes. The relationship between Montreal's French majority and its growing population of other ethnic groups was generally harmonious during this period. Scottish merchants like the McGill family integrated successfully into the city's commercial elite, while Irish and German immigrants found opportunities in the skilled trades. Indigenous peoples continued to play important roles in the fur trade, though their relationship with the expanding city was becoming increasingly complex. Montreal's influence extended far beyond its physical boundaries during these prosperous decades. The city served as the unofficial capital of the French fur trade empire, with decisions made in Montreal's counting houses affecting events from Hudson Bay to Louisiana. When conflicts arose between competing Indigenous groups or rival European powers, Montreal's merchants and administrators often found themselves serving as mediators and power brokers. The city's strategic importance was recognised by colonial administrators who invested heavily in its defences. New fortifications were constructed to protect Montreal's harbour and approaches, while the colonial government maintained substantial military forces in the city. These preparations reflected growing awareness that Montreal's prosperity made it an inevitable target for France's enemies. Education and intellectual life flourished as Montreal's wealth provided resources for scholarly pursuits. The Jesuit College, established in the city during this period, offered classical education that prepared young men for careers in the church, government, or commerce. Meanwhile, private tutors and small academies provided education for the children of wealthy families, creating a literate and cultured population that could hold its own with any colonial city. The arts found generous patronage among Montreal's merchant elite. Local musicians performed at elaborate social gatherings, while painters and sculptors created works that decorated the city's churches and private homes. Theatre, though still viewed with suspicion by some religious authorities, began to appear in private performances that entertained Montreal's sophisticated society. Montreal's golden age was also marked by remarkable achievements in exploration and mapping. The city served as headquarters for expeditions that filled in vast blank spaces on North American maps, with Montreal-based explorers reaching the Mandan villages of the upper Missouri River and establishing trading relationships with Indigenous peoples who had never before encountered Europeans. These explorations were not merely commercial ventures, but represented a genuine scientific enterprise that advanced European understanding of North American geography, natural history, and ethnography. Montreal-based explorers kept detailed journals of their discoveries, creating a body of knowledge that would prove invaluable to future generations of scientists and settlers. The city's medical institutions also advanced significantly during this period. The Hôtel Dieu Hospital, originally founded by Jan Mans, had evolved into a sophisticated medical centre that attracted patients from across New France. Its physicians and surgeons, trained in France but experienced in treating the unique ailments and injuries of North American life, developed innovative treatments that were studied and copied throughout the colonial world. As the 1750s approached, Montreal stood at the pinnacle of its influence and prosperity. The city commanded a commercial empire that spanned a continent. Its cultural institutions rivaled those of much larger European cities, and its population enjoyed a standard of living that was remarkable for the 18th century. The future seemed to promise unlimited expansion and ever greater prosperity. Yet beneath this glittering surface, currents of change were already stirring that would soon transform everything Montreal's residents had built. The 7 Years' War was approaching, a global conflict that would determine the fate of European empires and reshape the political map of North America forever. Montreal's residents could not have imagined that their golden age was drawing to a close, or that the very success of their city had made it a prize that rival powers would stop at nothing to claim. The greatest test in Montreal's history was about to begin, and its outcome would determine whether this remarkable French metropolis would survive to see another century. The 7 Years' War erupted in 1756, and with it came the realization that Montreal's golden age was about to face its ultimate test. What had begun as a distant European conflict quickly engulfed North America, transforming the continent into a vast battlefield where the fate of empires would be decided by blood and steel. For Montreal's residents, the war represented both existential threat and unprecedented opportunity. The city's strategic position made it inevitable that major military operations would centre on its control, while its wealth and infrastructure made it essential to French hopes of maintaining their North American empire. Every merchant who had grown rich from the fur trade, every craftsman who had built a comfortable life, every family that had called Montreal home for generations suddenly found their future hanging in the balance. The early years of the conflict seemed to favour French arms. Montreal's experienced woodsmen and Indigenous allies proved themselves masters of frontier warfare, launching devastating raids against English settlements and supply lines. The city served as a staging ground for expeditions that struck deep into enemy territory, carrying the war to the very doorsteps of Boston and New York. General Louis-Joseph de Montcalm arrived in Montreal in 1756 to take command of French forces in North America, bringing with him reinforcements and a reputation for military brilliance earned on European battlefields. His presence in the city electrified Montreal's population, who saw in this distinguished officer their best hope for victory against overwhelming odds. Montcalm's headquarters in Montreal became the nerve centre of French military operations across the continent. Intelligence flowed into the city from spies and scouts operating throughout English territory, while orders flowed out to commanders defending everything from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. The fate of New France was being decided in drawing rooms and war councils that met within walking distance of the spot where Maisonneuve had first raised his cross more than a century earlier. The city's transformation into a military headquarters brought both excitement and hardship to Montreal's residents. Soldiers filled the streets, their colourful uniforms and martial bearing adding drama to daily life. Military engineers strengthened the city's fortifications, while armories worked around the clock to produce weapons and ammunition for the expanding conflict. Yet war also brought shortages and privations that tested Montreal's resilience. Supply ships from France faced increasing danger from English naval patrols, making luxury goods scarce and expensive. Food became more difficult to obtain as farmers abandoned their fields to serve in militia units, while the constant demand for military supplies strained the city's manufacturing capacity. The fur trade, Montreal's economic lifeblood, faced disruption as war made the western routes increasingly dangerous. Indigenous allies who had traditionally brought their furs to Montreal were drawn into military service, while English forces worked systematically to cut the trading routes that connected the city to its continental empire. The canoe brigades that had departed each spring with such ceremony now often carried soldiers and ammunition rather than trade goods. Despite these challenges, Montreal's merchant families adapted to wartime conditions with characteristic ingenuity. They diversified their investments, shifted their trading networks, and found new ways to profit from military contracts and government spending. The war that threatened to destroy their commercial empire also created opportunities for those clever enough to exploit them. Women played increasingly important roles as the war intensified and drew men away from civilian occupations. Montreal's female religious orders expanded their activities to care for wounded soldiers and war refugees, while merchant families often relied on wives and daughters to manage businesses and properties. The city's social structure began to shift in ways that would have lasting consequences long after the guns fell silent. The victories of 1757 and 1758 filled Montreal with optimism and pride. Montcalm's triumph at Fort Carillon, where a small French force had defeated a much larger English army, seemed to prove that superior tactics and courage could overcome numerical disadvantage. Prisoners taken in these battles were often brought to Montreal, where their presence served as tangible proof of French military prowess. These victories also demonstrated Montreal's crucial role in sustaining French resistance. The city's workshops produced the weapons and equipment that armed Montcalm's soldiers, while its merchants organised the supply lines that kept French forces in the field. Without Montreal's resources and organisational capabilities, the remarkable French victories of the war's middle years would have been impossible. The celebration of these triumphs revealed how completely Montreal had embraced its role as the unofficial capital of French North America. Victory celebrations filled the city's streets with parades and festivities that rivaled anything seen in Paris or Versailles. The merchant elite competed to host the most elaborate entertainments for visiting officers, while common citizens gathered in taverns and public squares to toast French arms and curse English tyranny. Yet beneath this surface confidence, perceptive observers could detect signs of strain that would soon prove decisive. English naval supremacy was making it increasingly difficult for France to reinforce and resupply its North American forces. Ships that did manage to reach Montreal arrived with fewer soldiers and supplies than had been requested, while letters from France hinted at financial difficulties that limited the Crown's ability to support distant campaigns. The Indigenous alliances that had been so crucial to French success were also showing signs of stress. Years of warfare had taken a heavy toll on Montreal's Native American partners, who were growing weary of conflicts that seemed to benefit European powers more than themselves. Some groups began to consider whether their interests might be better served by accommodation with the English, who appeared to possess unlimited resources and determination. Montreal's own population was feeling the strain of prolonged warfare. The city had welcomed thousands of refugees from outlying settlements that had been abandoned or destroyed during the fighting. These displaced persons strained the city's resources and created social tensions that had been unknown during the prosperous peacetime years. Food shortages became increasingly serious as the war dragged on. The fertile farmlands around Montreal had been disrupted by military operations and the conscription of farmers into militia service. Ships carrying supplies from France were frequently intercepted by English warships, creating shortages of everything from flour to gunpowder. Citizens who had grown accustomed to abundance found themselves facing genuine hardship for the first time in decades. The winter of 1758 to 1759 brought particular suffering to Montreal's residents. Harsh weather combined with supply shortages to create conditions of real privation. Firewood became scarce and expensive, while food riots threatened public order. The city government was forced to implement rationing systems and price controls that would have been unthinkable during the prosperous pre-war years. Military preparations intensified as spring approached, bringing with it the certainty that 1759 would see decisive battles that would determine the war's outcome. Montreal's role as a supply depot and staging area became more crucial than ever, as French forces prepared for what many recognised might be their final opportunity to preserve New France. The fall of Quebec City in September 1759 sent shockwaves through Montreal that reverberated through every level of society. The news of Montcalm's death and Wolfe's victory on the Plains of Abraham arrived like a thunderbolt, transforming Montreal overnight from a confident military headquarters into a beleaguered stronghold facing imminent siege. General François Gaston de Lévis assumed command of the remaining French forces and established his headquarters in Montreal, making the city the last bastion of French resistance in North America. The weight of an entire empire's hopes now rested on Montreal's ability to withstand whatever the English could bring against it. The city's residents responded to this crisis with a mixture of determination and despair that reflected their understanding of what was at stake. Some families began making preparations to flee to Louisiana or France, recognizing that English conquest might mean the end of their way of life. Others threw themselves into preparations for a siege that would test everything Montreal had built over more than a century of existence. Military engineers worked frantically to strengthen Montreal's defences, while civilians were organised into work parties that built earthworks and stockpiled supplies. The city that had once been known for its elegant social gatherings now echoed with the sounds of hammers and shovels as its residents prepared for the battle of their lives. The fur trade, already disrupted by years of warfare, essentially collapsed as English forces gained control of the Great Lakes and the routes to the interior. Montreal's merchant families watched helplessly as their commercial empire disintegrated, leaving them dependent on rapidly dwindling reserves of capital and credit. Indigenous allies who had fought alongside the French for generations began to reconsider their allegiances, as English victory appeared increasingly inevitable. Diplomatic missions arrived in Montreal from various Native American groups, seeking to negotiate separate peaces that would protect their interests, regardless of what happened to their French partners. The spring of 1760 brought one final moment of hope, when de Lévis launched a desperate counterattack against Quebec City. For a few weeks, it seemed possible that French arms might yet reverse the tide of defeat. Montreal's residents followed news of the campaign with desperate intensity, understanding that their city's fate hung on the outcome of battles being fought hundreds of miles away. The failure of de Lévis' offensive and the arrival of English reinforcements by sea sealed Montreal's doom. The city now stood alone against enemies who commanded overwhelming superiority in numbers, supplies, and naval support. The golden age that had seemed to promise unlimited expansion was about to end in surrender and occupation. As summer arrived and English forces began converging on Montreal from multiple directions, the city's residents faced the most difficult decision in their history. They could fight to the bitter end, preserving their honour at the cost of their lives and their city's destruction. Or they could seek terms that might preserve something of what they had built, even under foreign rule. The choice would define not only Montreal's immediate future, but the character of the community that had grown from Maisonneuve's tiny band of religious colonists into one of North America's great cities. Everything that had been accomplished over more than a century now hung in the balance, awaiting a decision that would echo through the centuries to come. Come, The summer of 1760 unfolded like a slow-motion catastrophe for Montreal's inhabitants, each passing day bringing fresh evidence that their world was crumbling around them. 3 separate English armies were converging on the city like the closing jaws of a vast trap, their combined strength dwarfing anything the French could muster in defence. From the south came General Geoffrey Amherst with a force of over 10,000 men, methodically advancing up the Lake Champlain corridor that had witnessed so many French victories in earlier years. From the west, Colonel William Haviland led another substantial army through the Great Lakes region, sweeping aside the scattered French garrisons that had once controlled this vast territory. Most ominously, General James Murray was advancing up the St. Lawrence River from Quebec City with the core of the English forces that had conquered the colonial capital. Montreal's defenders could muster fewer than 3,000 regular troops and militia to face this overwhelming force. General de Levis knew that any attempt at sustained resistance would result in the city's complete destruction, yet the honour of French arms demanded that he not surrender without at least token resistance. The psychological impact of the approaching armies was perhaps more devastating than their military threat. For decades, Montreal's residents had grown accustomed to thinking of themselves as citizens of an expanding empire, secure in their prosperity and confident in their future. Now they faced the prospect of becoming subjects of a foreign power whose language, religion, and customs were alien to everything they had known. Panic selling swept through the city as wealthy families attempted to convert their assets into portable wealth that could be carried into exile. The elegant mansions that had been symbols of Montreal's golden age suddenly became burdens that their owners were desperate to escape. Paintings, furniture, and silverware that had been treasured family heirlooms were sold for whatever prices desperate buyers could offer. The fur trade, which had been the foundation of Montreal's prosperity for over a century, faced complete collapse. The trading routes that had connected the city to the continental interior were now controlled by English forces, while the Indigenous alliances that had sustained the trade were dissolving as various groups sought accommodation with the apparent victors. Some of Montreal's most prominent families began making preparations for exile, recognizing that English rule might make their continued residence impossible. Ships were chartered to carry refugees to Louisiana, the last remaining fragment of the French North American Empire, or back to France itself. These departures created a brain drain that robbed the city of much of its commercial and intellectual leadership. Yet not all of Montreal's residents despaired. Some of the city's merchants had maintained secret contacts with English commercial interests throughout the war, positioning themselves to profit from whatever political arrangements might emerge from French defeat. These pragmatic individuals recognized that Montreal's strategic location and commercial infrastructure would remain valuable regardless of which flag flew over the city. The common people of Montreal faced their own difficult choices. Many had family members serving in the French forces, while others had built their livelihoods around institutions and trades that might not survive under English rule. The uncertainty was perhaps more difficult to bear than outright catastrophe would have been. Religious leaders found themselves in particularly delicate positions. The Catholic Church had been intimately connected with French colonial administration, and there was genuine fear that English Protestant rule might mean persecution or at least severe restrictions on Catholic worship. The Sulpicians and other religious orders began hiding valuable religious artifacts and preparing for possible suppression of their activities. As August progressed and the English armies drew closer, Montreal's atmosphere became increasingly surreal. Normal commercial activity virtually ceased, yet the city's basic functions continued. Markets still opened each morning, though with fewer goods and higher prices. Churches still held services, though with prayers that reflected the community's desperate circumstances. The city's fortifications, which had been strengthened throughout the spring, were clearly inadequate to withstand a determined assault by the forces arrayed against Montreal. The walls that had once seemed so impressive now appeared pathetically thin when measured against English artillery and overwhelming numerical superiority. Refugees continued to stream into Montreal from outlying areas as English forces advanced, adding to the city's population just when resources were most strained. These displaced persons brought with them first-hand accounts of English military prowess and stories of communities that had already submitted to foreign rule. The fur trading season, which should have brought Montreal's annual renewal of prosperity, instead highlighted the complete disruption of the economic system that had sustained the city. The few Indigenous traders who did reach Montreal brought news of political upheavals throughout the Great Lakes region as various groups repositioned themselves for the new political reality. General de Lévis spent these final weeks attempting to negotiate terms that would preserve as much as possible of French interests in North America. He understood that Montreal's fall was inevitable, but hoped that skillful diplomacy might secure guarantees for the city's residents and their property rights under English rule. The arrival of the first English scouts in Montreal's vicinity in early September marked the beginning of the end. These advance parties established observation posts within sight of the city's walls, their presence serving as a constant reminder that French power in North America was entering its final hours. On September 6, 1760, the three English armies finally converged on Montreal, their combined strength creating a spectacle that awed even their enemies. The city found itself surrounded by a force of nearly 17,000 men, supported by artillery trains and naval vessels that controlled the St. Lawrence River. The sight of this vast military machine arrayed against Montreal drove home the hopelessness of continued resistance. Even the most ardent defenders of French honour recognised that any attempt to fight would result in unnecessary bloodshed and the city's destruction without achieving any meaningful military purpose. General de Lévis opened negotiations with the English commanders, seeking terms that would protect Montreal's civilian population and preserve what remained of French colonial institutions. These discussions took place against the backdrop of a city holding its collective breath, waiting to learn what the future would bring. The final negotiations revealed the complete transformation of power relationships in North America. Montreal, which had once been the centre of a continental empire, was now reduced to pleading for basic protections from conquering enemies. The merchant princes who had entertained European nobility in their elegant homes now found themselves supplicants, seeking permission to retain their property. On September 8, 1760, the Articles of Capitulation were signed, formally ending French rule in Montreal and marking the conclusion of New France as a political entity. The document that sealed Montreal's fate was remarkably generous in its terms, reflecting both English pragmatism and recognition of Montreal's importance to North American commerce. The articles guaranteed Montreal's residents protection of their persons and property, freedom of religious worship, and the right to continue trading under English rule. These concessions reflected the English understanding that Montreal's commercial networks and expertise would be valuable assets in their expanding North American empire. The formal surrender ceremony took place on September 9, 1760, in a spectacle that marked the end of an era in North American history. French troops marched out of Montreal with full military honours, their flags flying and drums beating, while English forces took possession of the city that had been the heart of French resistance. For Montreal's residents watching this ceremony, the emotions were complex and contradictory. There was relief that the uncertainty was over and that the city had been spared the destruction that prolonged resistance would have brought. Yet there was also profound sadness at witnessing the end of the world they had known and helped create. The immediate aftermath of the surrender was surprisingly calm. English officers worked to maintain order and prevent the looting that often accompanied military occupations. General Amherst issued proclamations guaranteeing the rights promised in the capitulation articles, while English administrators began the complex process of integrating Montreal into the British colonial system. Many of Montreal's French residents were surprised by the relatively benign nature of English rule in the city's first weeks under new management. Trade resumed almost immediately, with English merchants eager to tap into the commercial networks that Montreal's fur traders had spent generations developing. The transition period revealed both the strengths and vulnerabilities of Montreal's unique character. The city's commercial infrastructure and strategic location made it valuable to any colonial power, ensuring its continued importance regardless of political changes. Yet its distinctive French culture and Catholic religious identity created potential sources of conflict with Protestant English rulers. Some of Montreal's leading families chose exile despite the generous terms offered by the English. These departures represented not just personal tragedies, but a significant loss of human capital that would affect the city's development for generations to come. The knowledge, connections, and capital that left with these refugees could never be fully replaced. Yet for every family that chose exile, others decided to remain and adapt to the new political reality. These residents would form the core of Montreal's French-Canadian community under British rule, preserving essential elements of the city's character while learning to navigate the complexities of life under foreign government. The Catholic Church faced particular challenges in adapting to Protestant rule, yet found English authorities surprisingly tolerant of continued Catholic worship and education. This tolerance reflected both pragmatic politics and recognition that attempting to suppress Montreal's Catholic majority would create unnecessary instability. Indigenous peoples who had allied with the French during the war found themselves in particularly difficult positions following Montreal's surrender. Some groups had already begun negotiating separate accommodations with English forces, while others maintained loyalty to their French partners even after the political situation had become hopeless. The English takeover of Montreal represented more than just a change of government. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in North American history. The city that had been the capital of French expansion into the continental interior would now serve as a gateway for British commercial and territorial ambitions. As 1760 drew to a close, Montreal's residents were still adjusting to their new circumstances and attempting to understand what English rule would mean for their future. The golden age of French Montreal had ended, but the city's story was far from over. Indeed, some of its greatest chapters lay ahead, though they would be written under very different political and cultural circumstances. The transformation from French to British rule would prove to be just one of many dramatic changes that Montreal would experience in the centuries to come. The resilience and adaptability that had allowed the city to survive its precarious early years as a missionary settlement would serve it well as it navigated the challenges of life under foreign rule and eventually emerged as one of North America's great multicultural metropolises, Ulysses. The years immediately following the conquest brought unexpected stability to Montreal, as English administrators proved remarkably pragmatic in their approach to governing their new French-speaking subjects. Rather than attempting to remake the city in their own image, the British recognised that Montreal's existing commercial networks and cultural institutions represented valuable assets that would be foolish to destroy. General Thomas Gage, who served as Montreal's first British military governor, established policies that surprised many residents with their moderation. French civil law was permitted to continue alongside English criminal law, creating a hybrid legal system that reflected the city's unique circumstances. Catholic worship not only continued but flourished, as English authorities recognised that religious persecution would serve no useful purpose in their new possession. The fur trade, which many had expected to collapse under British rule, instead experienced a remarkable renaissance. English merchants brought with them access to manufactured goods and credit networks that had been unavailable during the final years of French rule. The Hudson's Bay Company, long Montreal's greatest commercial rival, now found itself working alongside rather than against the city's established trading families. Scottish merchants like James McGill and Simon McTavish emerged as key figures in this commercial transformation. These men possessed the capital and connections necessary to revitalise Montreal's trading networks, while their willingness to work with established French families helped smooth the transition to British rule. The partnerships that formed between Scottish capital and French expertise would define Montreal's commercial character for generations to come. The Northwest Company, established in Montreal during the 1770s, represented the culmination of this Anglo-French commercial cooperation. This remarkable enterprise combined the organisational skills of Scottish merchants with the wilderness expertise of French-Canadian voyageurs, creating a trading network that stretched from Montreal to the Pacific Ocean and challenged even the mighty Hudson's Bay Company for control of the continental fur trade. Montreal's voyageurs adapted to British rule with characteristic flexibility, continuing to paddle their canoes into the vast interior while serving new masters who appreciated their skills. The distinctive culture of these hardy woodsmen survived the political transition intact, their songs and stories carrying French traditions into the furthest reaches of the continent, even as political power shifted to English hands. The city's physical appearance began to change as well, though more gradually than might have been expected. English and Scottish merchants constructed new homes and commercial buildings that reflected their architectural preferences. Yet these structures often incorporated French design elements that acknowledged Montreal's existing character. The result was an increasingly eclectic cityscape that visually represented the cultural fusion taking place in Montreal's streets and counting houses. Educational institutions faced particular challenges during this transition period. The Jesuit College, which had served Montreal's elite for generations, found itself without teachers when the Jesuit order was suppressed throughout the British Empire. The Sulpician Seminary continued to operate, but under increased scrutiny from Protestant authorities who worried about Catholic influence on education. Women's religious orders proved more adaptable to the new circumstances. The Grey Nuns and other communities expanded their charitable work while maintaining their educational missions, finding that British authorities appreciated their social services even if they remained suspicious of Catholic doctrine. These institutions served as crucial bridges between Montreal's French past and its British future. The 1770s brought new challenges as revolutionary ferment in the American colonies created political complications for Montreal's British rulers. The Quebec Act of 1774 granted significant concessions to French Canadians, including guaranteed religious freedom and recognition of French civil law. But these measures were partly motivated by British fears that Montreal's population might otherwise support American revolutionary causes. The American invasion of 1775 to 1776 tested Montreal's loyalty to its new British rulers in the most direct way possible. Revolutionary forces under Richard Montgomery captured the city with surprising ease, occupying it for several months and attempting to win French-Canadian support for their cause. The occupation revealed both the fragility of British control and the complex loyalties of Montreal's residents. Many French Canadians remained neutral during the American occupation, viewing it as simply another change of masters that might or might not improve their circumstances. Others actively supported the Americans, seeing an opportunity to restore French influence in North America. Yet significant numbers remained loyal to British rule, recognizing that their religious and cultural freedoms were more secure under the Quebec Act than they might be under American Protestant governance. The eventual British recapture of Montreal in 1776 marked a turning point in the city's relationship with its English rulers. French Canadians who had remained loyal during the American occupation found their status enhanced, while those who had collaborated with the invaders faced suspicion and sometimes persecution. The experience taught both sides valuable lessons about the complexities of governing a multicultural society. Commercial life resumed with remarkable speed following the end of the American invasion. Montreal's merchants, whether French or English, shared a common interest in restoring the trading networks that had been disrupted by military operations. The fur trade proved particularly resilient, with demand for North American pelts remaining strong in European markets despite the political upheavals. The post-revolutionary period saw Montreal's commercial elite become increasingly integrated across ethnic lines. Marriages between French and Scottish families became common, creating kinship networks that transcended the linguistic divide. These personal relationships often translated into business partnerships that combined French knowledge of local conditions with Scottish access to international markets. Religious life in Montreal continued to evolve under British rule, with the Catholic Church adapting to its new circumstances while maintaining its essential character. The appointment of Jean-Olivier Briand as Bishop of Quebec in 1766 provided French Canadians with effective religious leadership that could negotiate successfully with Protestant authorities while preserving Catholic traditions. The construction of new churches during this period reflected Montreal's growing prosperity and the government's tolerance of Catholic worship. These buildings often combined French architectural traditions with British construction techniques, creating a distinctive Montreal style that would influence religious architecture throughout French Canada. Social life in Montreal became increasingly complex as English and Scottish families established themselves alongside the existing French population. Elaborate entertainments brought together merchants and officials from both communities, creating social networks that facilitated commercial cooperation while maintaining distinct cultural identities. The emergence of English-language newspapers and cultural institutions provided outlets for the growing Anglophone community, while French Canadians maintained their own cultural organisations. This parallel development of distinct yet interacting cultural spheres would become a defining characteristic of Montreal life for centuries to come. Montreal's role as a military centre continued under British rule, with the city serving as headquarters for forces defending Canada against potential American attacks. The construction of new fortifications and the presence of British regulars provided employment and economic stimulus, while reminding residents of their strategic importance to the British Empire. The fur trade reached new heights during the 1780s and 1790s as Montreal-based companies extended their operations across the continent. Alexander Mackenzie's journey to the Pacific Ocean in 1793, financed and organised from Montreal, demonstrated the city's continued role as a launching pad for continental exploration and commercial expansion. These trading expeditions employed thousands of men from Montreal and surrounding areas, creating a distinctive occupational culture that blended French-Canadian traditions with Scottish business practices. The annual departure and return of trading brigades continued to be major events in Montreal's calendar, marking the rhythm of commercial life in the city. The development of new industries beyond the fur trade began to diversify Montreal's economy during this period. Shipbuilding expanded to meet the needs of the growing commercial fleet, while distilleries and breweries served both local consumption and the export trade. These industries provided employment for skilled craftsmen while generating capital for further economic development. Banking and financial services emerged as Montreal merchants accumulated capital and required more sophisticated methods of managing their far-flung commercial operations. The first banks in Montreal were established during this period, providing credit and currency exchange services that facilitated the city's growing international trade. The population of Montreal grew steadily under British rule, reaching nearly 20,000 by the end of the 18th century. This growth came from both natural increase and immigration, with newcomers arriving from Britain, the United States, and other parts of Canada. The city's ethnic composition became increasingly diverse while French Canadians maintained their majority status. Housing construction boomed as Montreal's population expanded and prospered. New neighbourhoods developed beyond the original city walls, while existing areas saw older buildings replaced with more substantial structures. The architectural mix of French, British and hybrid styles created a distinctive urban landscape that reflected Montreal's complex cultural identity. Transportation improvements connected Montreal more effectively with other parts of North America and the wider world. Better roads linked the city to Quebec and the Atlantic ports, while improvements to the St. Lawrence River navigation system facilitated the movement of goods and people. These infrastructure developments positioned Montreal to take advantage of the economic opportunities that the new century would bring. As the 18th century drew to a close, Montreal had successfully navigated the transition from French to British rule while maintaining its essential character as a commercial and cultural centre. The city, that had begun as a missionary settlement and flourished as the capital of a fur trading empire, had reinvented itself once again, proving the remarkable adaptability that would carry it through centuries of change and challenge. The foundations were being laid for Montreal's emergence as British North America's commercial metropolis, a role that would bring new prosperity and influence while creating fresh challenges and opportunities. The 19th century would test Montreal's resilience in new ways while offering unprecedented possibilities for growth and development. Yet the essential elements that had made Montreal unique since its founding remained intact. The city's strategic location, its multicultural character, and its commercial expertise continued to serve it well under British rule. The story of Montreal was far from over. Indeed, some of its most dramatic chapters were yet to be written as the city prepared to enter a new century that would bring revolutionary changes to North America and the world. The dawn of the 19th century found Montreal poised on the threshold of unprecedented transformation. The city that had weathered the storms of conquest and political upheaval now stood ready to embrace an era of explosive growth that would reshape not only its physical boundaries, but its very identity as a North American metropolis. The early years of the new century brought with them a spirit of enterprise and expansion that seemed to electrify Montreal's streets. The old certainties of the fur trade, while still profitable, were giving way to new forms of commerce and industry that promised to unlock wealth on a scale previously unimaginable. Steam power, that revolutionary force that was transforming the world, arrived in Montreal with dramatic consequences that would echo through the decades to come. The first steamboat to navigate the St. Lawrence River reached Montreal in 1809, its smoking funnel and churning paddle wheels announcing the arrival of a new age. The Accommodation, as this pioneering vessel was called, could cover in hours journeys that had previously required days of arduous travel by canoe or sailing ship. Suddenly, Montreal found itself connected to the outside world in ways that seemed almost magical to residents who had grown up with the seasonal rhythms of water transportation. This revolution in transportation coincided with equally dramatic changes in Montreal's social and economic structure. The old fur trading aristocracy, while still influential, now found themselves sharing prominence with a new generation of entrepreneurs who saw opportunity in manufacturing, shipping, and finance rather than in the traditional wilderness trades. The Molson family exemplified this transformation, John Molson, who had established Canada's first brewery in Montreal during the 1780s, expanded his operations to include steamboat building, banking, and railway development. His enterprises demonstrated how Montreal's established commercial families were adapting to changing times while maintaining their positions of leadership in the community. Banking emerged as a crucial industry during these transformative years. The Bank of Montreal, chartered in 1817, represented the first major financial institution to be established in British North America. Its imposing headquarters on Saint-Jacques Street announced to the world that Montreal had arrived as a serious commercial centre capable of competing with the great cities of Europe and the United States. The bank's influence extended far beyond Montreal's boundaries, financing everything from fur trading expeditions to early industrial ventures throughout British North America. Its notes circulated as currency across the continent, while its credit facilities enabled Montreal merchants to expand their operations on an unprecedented scale. The institution became a symbol of Montreal's growing financial sophistication and its emergence as the economic capital of British North America. Industrial development accelerated throughout the 1820s and 1830s as entrepreneurs recognized Montreal's advantages as a manufacturing centre. The city's location at the head of ocean navigation on the St. Lawrence River made it an ideal point for processing raw materials arriving from the interior before shipping finished goods to international markets. Textile mills began appearing along Montreal's waterfront, their spinning wheels and looms powered by steam engines that filled the air with smoke and noise previously unknown in the city. These establishments employed hundreds of workers, many of them recent immigrants from Britain who brought with them the skills and experience of the Industrial Revolution's birthplace. The construction of the Lachine Canal, completed in 1825, marked a watershed moment in Montreal's industrial development. This engineering marvel bypassed the treacherous Lachine Rapids that had long prevented large vessels from reaching Montreal directly from the Great Lakes. Suddenly, the city found itself connected by water to the vast interior of North America, opening new possibilities for trade and development that excited even the most conservative merchants. The canal's completion triggered a construction boom along its banks, as industrialists rushed to take advantage of the water power and transportation access it provided. Mills, foundries, and workshops sprouted like mushrooms after rain, transforming what had been quiet residential areas into bustling industrial districts filled with the sounds of hammers, steam engines, and rushing water. Irish immigration began to transform Montreal's demographic composition during the 1820s and 1830s. These newcomers, many fleeing poverty and political oppression in their homeland, provided the labour force necessary for Montreal's industrial expansion. They settled primarily in working-class neighbourhoods, where their distinctive culture added new elements to the city's already complex social fabric. The Irish brought with them not just their labour, but their political traditions and religious practices. As Catholics, they found common ground with French Canadians in their shared faith. Yet their English language and British citizenship created different relationships with the Protestant establishment. This triangular dynamic between French Catholics, Irish Catholics, and Protestant Anglophones would define Montreal politics for generations to come. The cholera epidemics of 1832 and 1834 revealed both Montreal's vulnerabilities and its remarkable capacity for community response. These devastating outbreaks, which killed thousands of residents, exposed the inadequacies of the city's sanitation systems and medical facilities. Yet they also demonstrated the strength of Montreal's charitable institutions and the willingness of citizens from all communities to work together in the face of common danger. The Grey Nuns and other religious orders played heroic roles during these epidemics, caring for the sick and dying without regard for their own safety. Their selfless service earned them respect across ethnic and religious lines, while reinforcing the important role that Catholic institutions played in Montreal's social fabric. These health crises also spurred improvements in Montreal's infrastructure that would benefit the city for decades to come. New hospitals were constructed, sewage systems were improved, and public health measures were implemented that helped prevent future epidemics. The experience taught Montreal's leaders valuable lessons about the responsibilities that came with urban growth and industrial development. Political tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface of Montreal society erupted into open conflict during the 1830s. The Patriot movement, led by Louis-Joseph Papineau, articulated French-Canadian frustrations with British rule while calling for democratic reforms and greater autonomy for Lower Canada. Montreal became a hotbed of political activity as reformers organised rallies, published newspapers, and challenged the authority of the appointed government. The city's French-Canadian majority provided strong support for the Patriot cause, while many English-speaking residents viewed the movement with suspicion and alarm. The rebellions of 1837 to 1838 brought armed conflict to Montreal's doorstep as Patriot forces clashed with British troops and loyal militia. While the city itself remained under government control, the surrounding countryside witnessed battles that divided communities and families along ethnic and political lines. The defeat of the rebellions brought harsh repression to Montreal's French-Canadian community. Patriot leaders were executed or exiled, newspapers were suppressed, and martial law was imposed on the city. The experience left deep scars in Montreal's collective memory, while demonstrating the limits of British tolerance for French-Canadian political aspirations. Yet even these traumatic events could not halt Montreal's economic development. The city's strategic advantages remained unchanged, and entrepreneurs from all communities continued to invest in its future. The 1840s saw renewed growth as political tensions eased and new opportunities emerged from changing economic conditions. The Act of Union in 1840, which merged Upper and Lower Canada into a single province, had profound implications for Montreal's future. While French Canadians viewed the Union with suspicion, seeing it as an attempt to assimilate them into English culture, the measure also created new opportunities for economic integration and development. Montreal's merchants quickly recognized the advantages of access to Upper Canada's growing markets and resources. The city's financial institutions expanded their operations westward, while its manufacturers found new customers for their products. The political union that had been intended to diminish French-Canadian influence inadvertently strengthened Montreal's position as the commercial centre of British North America. Railway development emerged as the next great transformative force in Montreal's history. The city's business leaders understood that steam locomotion would revolutionize transportation just as steamboats had done on the waterways. They moved aggressively to position Montreal as the hub of British North America's emerging railway network. The St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railway, connecting Montreal to Portland, Maine, was the first major rail line to serve the city. Its completion in 1853 provided Montreal with a year-round connection to ice-free Atlantic ports, breaking the seasonal isolation that had long constrained the city's growth during winter months. This railway connection transformed Montreal from a regional centre into a truly international city. Goods could now flow between Montreal and European markets throughout the year, while passengers could travel between the city and major American centres in comfort and speed that would have seemed impossible just decades earlier. The Grand Trunk Railway, incorporated in 1852 with Montreal as its headquarters, represented an even more ambitious vision of railway development. This massive enterprise aimed to create a transportation system spanning the entire width of British North America, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through Montreal's central position. The Grand Trunk's construction employed thousands of workers and consumed vast amounts of capital, much of it raised in Montreal's increasingly sophisticated financial markets. The project demonstrated the city's growing capacity to organise and finance large-scale infrastructure development while cementing its position as British North America's railway capital. These transportation improvements coincided with continued industrial expansion that was making Montreal one of North America's leading manufacturing centres. The city's foundries produced steam engines and railway equipment for customers across the continent, while its textile mills competed successfully with established producers in Britain and the United States. The emergence of a distinct working class created new social dynamics in Montreal as industrial workers organised to protect their interests against increasingly powerful employers. Labour disputes became common as workers sought better wages and conditions, while employers struggled to maintain profitability in competitive markets. These conflicts often took on ethnic dimensions, as French-Canadian workers found themselves competing with Irish immigrants for employment, while both groups faced discrimination from English-speaking employers. The resulting tensions created complex political alliances that would influence Montreal's development for generations to come. Women's roles in Montreal society began to evolve as industrial development created new opportunities and challenges. While many women found employment in textile mills and other factories, they typically received lower wages than men and worked under difficult conditions. Yet this economic participation also provided new forms of independence and social influence. Middle-class women in Montreal increasingly engaged in charitable and reform activities that extended their influence beyond the domestic sphere. Organisations like the Montreal Ladies' Benevolent Society demonstrated how women could address social problems while maintaining their respectability according to Victorian standards. Educational institutions expanded to meet the needs of Montreal's growing and increasingly diverse population. New schools were established for children from all ethnic communities, while higher education began to develop along denominational lines that reflected the city's religious divisions. McGill University, chartered in 1821, emerged as Montreal's premier English language institution of higher learning. Its medical school and engineering programs attracted students from across North America while contributing to Montreal's reputation as a centre of learning and culture. French-Canadian education remained under the control of the Catholic Church, which established colleges and seminaries that preserved French culture while preparing young men for careers in the professions and religious life. These parallel educational systems reflected Montreal's dual character while creating distinct intellectual traditions that would influence the city's development. Cultural life flourished as Montreal's prosperity provided resources for artistic and intellectual pursuits. The city's theatres presented performances in both English and French, while literary societies and debating clubs provided forums for intellectual exchange. Newspapers proliferated, serving the information needs of different ethnic and political communities. The visual arts began to develop as Montreal's wealthy families provided patronage for local artists while importing works from Europe and the United States. Portrait painting thrived as successful merchants and professionals sought to commemorate their achievements, while landscape artists began to capture the distinctive beauty of Montreal's natural setting. Music became an important part of Montreal's cultural life, as military bands, church choirs, and amateur musical societies provided entertainment and cultural enrichment. The city's diverse population contributed different musical traditions that began to blend into distinctive Montreal styles. Architecture evolved to reflect Montreal's growing sophistication and prosperity. The neoclassical style became popular for public buildings and wealthy residences, while commercial structures adopted designs that emphasized both functionality and grandeur. The result was an increasingly impressive cityscape that proclaimed Montreal's status as British North America's premier city. Religious architecture remained particularly important as different communities built churches and other religious structures that served both spiritual needs and community identity. The construction of Notre Dame Basilica, completed in 1829, represented French-Canadian architectural achievement, while demonstrating the continued vitality of Catholic culture in Montreal. As the 1850s progressed, Montreal stood transformed from the modest commercial centre of the early 19th century into a genuine metropolis that rivaled established cities in Europe and the United States. Its population approached 60,000, making it by far the largest city in British North America and one of the most important urban centres on the continent. The foundations were firmly in place for even more dramatic growth and development in the decades to come. Montreal's transportation networks, industrial capacity, financial institutions, and cultural resources positioned it to take advantage of the unprecedented opportunities that the mid-19th century would bring to North America. Yet this remarkable transformation had also created new challenges and tensions that would test Montreal's ability to maintain its unique character while adapting to rapidly changing circumstances. The city's success had attracted diverse populations whose different languages, religions, and cultural traditions would require careful management to prevent destructive conflict. The stage was set for Montreal's emergence as one of North America's great cities, a cosmopolitan metropolis that would play crucial roles in the development of Canada and the broader continent. The story of this remarkable transformation was far from over, with the most dramatic chapters yet to be written as Montreal prepared to enter the industrial age in earnest. The 1860s arrived with Montreal poised to claim its destiny as the undisputed metropolis of British North America. The city's transformation from a modest fur trading settlement to an industrial powerhouse had been remarkable, yet the forces unleashing themselves across the continent promised changes that would dwarf everything that had come before. The American Civil War, raging south of the border, created unexpected opportunities for Montreal's merchants and manufacturers. Union blockades of Confederate ports redirected trade routes through British North America, bringing new prosperity to the city's shipping and financial sectors. Montreal's textile mills worked overtime to supply military contracts, while its foundries produced equipment for railways and steamships that carried goods around the disrupted American networks. This wartime boom attracted fresh waves of immigrants to Montreal, including skilled craftsmen and entrepreneurs who recognized the opportunities that industrial expansion offered. German mechanics arrived with knowledge of precision manufacturing, while Italian stonemasons brought techniques that would influence Montreal's distinctive architectural character for generations to come. The city's physical boundaries expanded rapidly during these prosperous years as new neighborhoods sprouted beyond the old city limits. Suburban development followed the railway lines that radiated outward from Montreal's central core, creating communities that maintained distinct identities while remaining connected to the metropolitan economy. Saint-Antoine Ward emerged as the preferred residential area for Montreal's English-speaking elite, its tree-lined streets and substantial mansions proclaiming the wealth that commerce and industry had generated. These impressive homes, built in styles ranging from Georgian to Second Empire, featured the latest conveniences, including gas lighting and indoor plumbing that marked their owners as thoroughly modern citizens. Meanwhile, French-Canadian families established themselves in neighbourhoods that preserved their cultural traditions while adapting to urban life. Saint-Jacques Ward and other districts developed their own commercial centres, churches and schools that maintained the French character that had defined Montreal since its earliest days. The construction of Victoria Bridge, completed in 1860, represented one of the greatest engineering achievements of the 19th century and a powerful symbol of Montreal's growing importance. This massive iron structure, stretching nearly 2 miles across the St. Lawrence River, connected Montreal directly with the expanding railway networks of the United States, while demonstrating the city's capacity to undertake projects of unprecedented scale and complexity. The bridge's opening ceremony attracted visitors from across North America and Europe, transforming Montreal temporarily into the centre of international attention. The Prince of Wales himself presided over the festivities, lending royal approval to the city's achievements while emphasising its crucial role within the British Empire. Railway development accelerated throughout the decade as Montreal consolidated its position as the hub of British North America's transportation network. The Grand Trunk Railway's expansion created direct connections between Montreal and major cities from Portland to Chicago, while new lines reached into the maritime provinces and the expanding territories of the Canadian West. These transportation improvements transformed Montreal's relationship with its hinterland in fundamental ways. Farmers throughout the Great Lakes region could now ship their grain through Montreal to European markets, while manufactured goods produced in the city's factories reached consumers across half the continent. The economic integration that railways made possible positioned Montreal as the natural commercial capital of whatever political arrangements might emerge in British North America. Industrial development diversified beyond the traditional sectors of textiles and iron. Working as entrepreneurs recognized new opportunities in Montreal's expanding economy. Sugar refineries processed raw materials arriving from the Caribbean, while tobacco factories served growing markets throughout British North America. These industries employed thousands of workers while generating capital for further investment and expansion. The emergence of a substantial working class created new social dynamics that challenged Montreal's traditional hierarchies. Labour organisations began forming along both craft and ethnic lines as workers sought to protect their interests against increasingly powerful employers. French-Canadian workers often found themselves competing with Irish and other immigrant groups for employment, creating tensions that periodically erupted into strikes and civil disturbances. These conflicts revealed the complex interplay of class, ethnicity, and religion that was becoming central to Montreal's identity. French-Canadian workers might share Catholic faith with their Irish counterparts while competing for the same jobs. Just as English-speaking workers from different backgrounds might unite against French-Canadian competitors despite their own ethnic differences. Women's participation in Montreal's industrial economy expanded significantly during this period, particularly in textile manufacturing, where female workers often comprised the majority of the workforce. These women, many of them young and unmarried, earned wages that provided unprecedented independence while challenging traditional assumptions about gender roles and family structures. The concentration of young female workers in Montreal's industrial districts created new forms of social organisation and cultural expression. Boarding houses and social clubs emerged to serve their needs, while new forms of popular entertainment attracted audiences that crossed traditional class and ethnic boundaries. Banking and finance continued to grow in importance as Montreal's merchants required increasingly sophisticated services to manage their expanding operations. The Bank of Montreal established branches throughout British North America and maintained correspondent relationships with major financial institutions in London and New York, positioning Montreal as a crucial node in international capital markets. Insurance companies, trust companies, and investment firms established themselves in Montreal during these prosperous years, creating a financial sector that rivaled those of much larger cities. The concentration of financial expertise and capital in Montreal strengthened the city's position as the economic centre of British North America, while providing resources for continued expansion and development. Educational institutions expanded to serve Montreal's growing population, while reflecting the city's linguistic and religious divisions. New schools were established for children from all communities, though often in separate systems that maintained distinct cultural identities. The Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal served the English-speaking population, while Catholic institutions educated French-Canadian children according to their own traditions and values. Higher education began to develop along similar lines as different communities established institutions that reflected their particular needs and aspirations. McGill University attracted students from across English-speaking North America, while French-Canadian colleges prepared young men for careers in law, medicine, and the priesthood. These parallel educational systems contributed to Montreal's intellectual vitality while maintaining the cultural distinctions that gave the city much of its character. Graduates from these institutions often went on to play leading roles in Montreal's commercial, professional, and political life, creating networks that transcended immediate ethnic boundaries while preserving essential cultural identities. Cultural life flourished as Montreal's prosperity provided resources for increasingly sophisticated artistic and intellectual pursuits. The city's theatres presented performances by touring companies from Europe and the United States, while local amateur groups produced works that reflected Montreal's unique cultural character. Literary culture began to develop as Montreal's newspapers and magazines provided outlets for local writers and poets. French-Canadian authors like Octave Crémazie and Louis Fréchette gained recognition for works that celebrated their culture's survival and achievements, while English-speaking writers contributed to the broader British North American literary tradition. The visual arts found growing support among Montreal's wealthy families who provided patronage for local artists while importing works from established cultural centres. Portrait painting remained popular as successful merchants and professionals sought to commemorate their achievements, while landscape artists began to capture the distinctive beauty of Montreal's urban and natural environments. Music became an increasingly important part of Montreal's cultural identity as different communities contributed their own traditions to the city's growing repertoire. Military bands provided public entertainment, church choirs maintained religious musical traditions, and amateur societies organised concerts that brought together performers and audiences from different backgrounds. Architecture continued to evolve as Montreal's builders adapted European styles to North American conditions and materials. The Second Empire style became particularly popular for both public buildings and private residences. Its distinctive mansard roofs and elaborate ornamentation reflecting the prosperity and confidence of the era. Religious architecture remained especially significant as different communities constructed churches and other buildings that served both spiritual needs and community identity. The completion of St. Patrick's Basilica in 1847 had provided Montreal's Irish Catholic community with a magnificent house of worship, while Protestant denominations built their own impressive structures that proclaimed their place in the city's religious landscape. Commercial architecture began to reflect Montreal's growing importance as a business centre. The new Bank of Montreal building, completed in 1859, set new standards for commercial construction with its impressive scale and classical design. Other financial institutions and major commercial enterprises followed suit, creating a downtown district that proclaimed Montreal's status as British North America's business capital. Public works projects transformed Montreal's infrastructure during these prosperous years. New water systems provided cleaner and more reliable supplies to the growing population, while gas lighting illuminated the principal streets and made evening activities safer and more pleasant. Telegraph lines connected Montreal with other major cities, enabling almost instantaneous communication that facilitated business operations across vast distances. The construction of new markets, hospitals, and other public facilities reflected Montreal's growing sophistication as an urban centre. The Bon Secours market, completed in 1847, provided a magnificent setting for commercial activity while demonstrating the city's commitment to combining functionality with architectural beauty. Parks and public spaces began to receive attention as Montreal's leaders recognized the need for recreational facilities in the increasingly crowded urban environment. Mount Royal, the mountain that had given the city its name, was preserved as public space while the waterfront was developed to provide both commercial facilities and pleasant promenades for citizens seeking relief from urban pressures. Transportation within the city improved as omnibus lines connected different neighbourhoods, while ferry services provided convenient access across the St. Lawrence River. These improvements made it possible for Montreal's residents to live at greater distances from their workplaces while maintaining access to the city's commercial and cultural amenities. The 1860s also witnessed important developments in Montreal's relationship with the broader world as improved communications and transportation connected the city more closely with international networks. Regular steamship service to Europe made travel faster and more comfortable, while the Atlantic cable enabled almost instantaneous communication with London and other major centres. These connections reinforced Montreal's position as a cosmopolitan city that participated fully in the cultural and intellectual currents of the broader Atlantic world. Ideas, fashions, and innovations arrived in Montreal almost as quickly as they reached other major cities, while the city's own contributions to commerce, industry, and culture gained international recognition. Political developments during the 1860s would prove crucial to Montreal's future as discussions of British North American Confederation gained momentum. The city's business leaders generally supported political union, recognizing that larger markets and coordinated policies would benefit Montreal's continued growth and development. The Great Coalition of 1864 and subsequent Confederation negotiations placed Montreal at the center of discussions about British North America's political future. The city's representatives played important roles in crafting the arrangements that would create the Dominion of Canada, ensuring that Montreal's interests were protected in the new constitutional framework. Confederation, when it finally came in 1867, would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Montreal's history. The city that had survived conquest, political upheaval, and dramatic economic transformation was poised to play a leading role in the new nation while maintaining its distinctive character as North America's most important French-speaking metropolis. The foundations for continued growth and prosperity were firmly established as the 1860s drew to a close. Montreal's transportation networks, industrial capacity, financial institutions, and cultural resources positioned it to take advantage of the opportunities that Confederation and continued continental development would bring. Yet the challenges were as significant as the opportunities. Managing the tensions between different ethnic and religious communities, adapting to rapidly changing economic conditions, and maintaining Montreal's unique character while participating fully in North American development would require all the wisdom and adaptability that had carried the city through previous transformations. The stage was set for Montreal's emergence as one of North America's truly great cities, a cosmopolitan metropolis that would serve as both the commercial heart of the new Dominion of Canada and a beacon of French civilization in an overwhelmingly English-speaking continent. The most dramatic chapters of this remarkable story were yet to be written as Montreal prepared to enter the modern age. Montreal prepared to enter the modern were yet to be written as age. The year 1867 marked not merely a political milestone, but a profound transformation in Montreal's destiny as the city found itself positioned as the beating commercial heart of the newly formed Dominion of Canada. The British North America Act had created a nation that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Yet Montreal's central location and established infrastructure made it the natural hub through which the wealth and commerce of this vast territory would flow. The immediate aftermath of Confederation brought an explosion of economic activity that dwarfed even the prosperous war years of the previous decade. Montreal's merchants and financiers recognized that they now commanded access to markets and resources on a scale that their predecessors could never have imagined. The protective tariffs that came with national status shielded Canadian industries from foreign competition, while the promise of Western expansion offered unlimited opportunities for those bold enough to seize them. Railway construction accelerated with breathtaking speed as the new federal government committed itself to binding the scattered provinces together with ribbons of steel. Montreal's position as the eastern terminus of the Canadian Pacific Railway, that audacious project to span the continent, transformed the city into the command centre for one of the greatest engineering undertakings in human history. The construction camps and supply depots that supported this massive enterprise created unprecedented demand for Montreal's manufactured goods. The city's foundries worked around the clock, producing rails, spikes, and locomotive parts, while its textile mills supplied clothing and equipment for thousands of workers labouring in the wilderness beyond the Great Lakes. Every mile of track laid westward strengthened Montreal's grip on the continental economy. Sir Hugh Allen emerged as the embodiment of Montreal's imperial ambitions during these transformative years. His shipping empire connected Montreal with ports around the world, while his industrial interests spanned everything from textiles to telegraph lines. The Allen Line steamships that carried passengers and cargo between Montreal and Liverpool became symbols of the city's growing international prominence. The magnificent mansions that rose along Sherbrooke Street during the 1870s proclaimed the arrival of a new class of merchant princes whose wealth rivaled that of European aristocracy. These palatial residences, built in styles ranging from Gothic Revival to Second Empire, featured conservatories, ballrooms, and libraries that could accommodate hundreds of guests. The social season that developed around these establishments transformed Montreal into one of North America's most glittering cultural centres. Yet beneath this surface splendour, profound changes were reshaping the fundamental character of Montreal society. The massive influx of immigrants required to fuel industrial expansion was altering the city's demographic balance in ways that created both opportunities and tensions. Irish labourers continued to arrive in substantial numbers, while growing communities of Germans, Italians, and Eastern Europeans added new languages and traditions to Montreal's already complex cultural mix. French Canadians found themselves navigating an increasingly complicated urban environment where their majority status could no longer be taken for granted. The Anglicisation of Montreal's business district created economic pressures that forced many French Canadian families to make difficult choices between cultural preservation and material advancement. Bilingualism became essential for anyone seeking success in Montreal's commercial world, yet this requirement often came at the cost of traditional cultural practices. From that humble missionary settlement founded by Maisonneuve's 40 devoted colonists to the bustling metropolis that dominated British North America's commerce, Montreal's journey reveals the extraordinary power of human resilience and adaptation. Through conquest and rebellion, plague and prosperity, this remarkable city has repeatedly proven that true greatness lies not in avoiding change, but in embracing it while preserving what matters most. Today's Montreal, with its festivals and underground passages, its towering skyscrapers and cobblestone streets, stands as living proof that cultures need not disappear to survive. They need only evolve.